Now we're going to shift to our keynote panel, The Dynamic Downtown, Many Hands, Many Voices, and a Little Bit of Grit, to learn more about Bellows Falls. And for that, I'm going to invite our moderator and panelists to come up on the stage. And I'll introduce the moderator, Susan Evans-McClure from Vermont Arts Council. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, the panelists want to come on up. Keep track of where everyone is sitting. Yeah, you're a little close together there. That's part of the ways that Bellows Falls likes to live dangerously. All right. Well, good morning. I'm Susan Evans-McClure. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Arts Council. So thrilled to be here in Bellows Falls, and a big thank you to the entire team putting on today's conference for inviting me to be part of this. You know, I think you've already heard this morning, and you're experiencing it right now, that Bellows Falls is really experiencing a resurgence. You can feel it when you walk out. You can feel it when you walk out on the street. You know, there's redevelopment projects that integrate the indigenous stories in place, arts and culture, new businesses, the train. Bellows Falls, as you might have heard, really isn't nearly as bad as you think. But all that you're seeing right now in Bellows Falls, all of the success, it's really all the result of years and years of hard work and community building. A phrase that I first heard to describe St. John's area, I think really applies here. That what we're seeing in Bellows Falls and in St. John's area and in other towns around the state is a 20-year overnight success story. We see the very end results, but we know that there are people who've been working on it for years and years and lifetimes. So at our talk this morning, we're going to be examining really what made this happen here at Bellows Falls, and how can we help keep these great things happening here and spread that magic around the state to all of our downtown communities. So I'm really happy to be joined today by this rock star panel of people who are making it happen here in Bellows Falls. And I'm going to take just a short moment to introduce them, and then we'll hear directly from them. So starting here on my left, so starting here, Elizabeth. Raise your hand to say, starting with Elizabeth. Elizabeth Bridgewater is the Executive Director of Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust. Worked on a lot of great projects here in Bellows Falls and the region. Next to her is Gail Golick, an archaeologist and co-manager of the Kitchie Pontogoff project, which she will talk about too. Next to her is Robert McBride, the founding director of RAMP, the Rockingham Arts and Museum Project, and local legend. Next to Robert is Jeff Dunbar. Jeff's an engaged citizen of Rockingham, and he's on several local boards. He's a recently former village trustee and a partner at Whitaker Properties. And next to Jeff is Michael Bruno, the owner of the Wyndham Antique Center, a local business owner. So I am actually looking for potentially Gary to help with some microphones. I should have set this up before I started talking, but I just couldn't help myself. That's how excited I am about Bellows Falls. So we're going to pass around those microphones, I think, to our panelists. And we're actually going to start off with Gail here. Gail is going to ground us in a little history of this place. I've asked Gail to do the impossible, which is describe the entire history of Bellows Falls from the beginning of time to today in 5 minutes. So Gail, I'm going to vamp now for some time while I'm organized. I know that Gail can do it, and it's going to be fascinating, and it's going to be brief, because we have a lot to talk about here in this dynamic community. So, Gail, can you start us off? Where are we? What are some of the highlights? The brief history.
It is. It's incredibly brief. We're going to do 13,000 years in 5 minutes, so that should be very doable. So to start with, I think in getting to know and understand this place, it really helps to keep in mind that no matter what group of people we're talking about, no matter what time period we're talking about, this place is grounded and connected to the falls and the river. That is the center of this place, and all the stories that you're going to learn about here today. They are the thing that has attracted people to this spot and sustained them for thousands and thousands of years. The land and the wider region here has been inhabited continuously by indigenous people going back at least 12,500 years, and there is evidence locally of indigenous presence for at least 9,000, but likely going back much longer than that. And that presence continues here still today, to this very day. And everything that you heard from Rich Holshoe and presented by Chief Roger Long-Toshihan have already spoken to this in much greater depth and far more eloquently than I could ever say. The Euro-American history in this region goes back at least to the early 18th century, with English outposts and garrisons established in the 1720s, a little bit farther south than where we are on Connecticut. And up into the 1840s, there's also garrisons established a little farther north than where we are. And it's not until the 1750s that there are garrisons established in Walpole, New Hampshire, right across the river. And like most towns in this section of the Connecticut River, Rockingham was chartered in 1753, even though no sustained Euro-American settlements really took hold until the end of the French and Indian Wars in 1763. So by the end of the 18th century, the village of Bellows Falls in particular, which is part of the town of Rockingham, became the site of two modern feats of engineering. The first was the first, and for a long time, the only bridge that crossed the Connecticut River, which was constructed here in 1784, and the first canal constructed in the United States, which was completed in 1802. The bridge helped the village become a literal crossroads for travelers and goods. And that trend continued with the arrival of the railroads in the late 1840s. The village became a travel destination for a time in the mid-19th century, accommodating visitors who were drawn to the natural beauty of the area, the river, the falls, and the mountain all here, and made all the more accessible by the railroad. The increasing industrialization of Bellows Falls, the village in particular, continued through the latter half of the 19th century, capitalizing on the direct and indirect water power provided by the canal. The areas known as the island and under the hill along in the village along the river had developed into a series of mill complexes and were aided by the increasing use of Bellows Falls as a railroad hub. International Paper was established here at Bellows Falls in 1898, processing pulp with large-scale industrial mill production, with its heyday reaching between with mills heyday production between 1885 and 1921. The mills and the railroad supported hundreds of immigrant families who moved to Bellows Falls and also lived across the river in North Walpole, New Hampshire. Things began to change in town in the 1920s when International Paper abruptly closed, and as business models and technology changed throughout the 20th century, the industries that had for a very brief time made Bellows Falls the center of commerce, the mills, railroads, and paper mills and all their ancillary businesses, slowly closed, and with nothing quite as influential or robust to take their place, which was a trend that continued until the 1990s. And so everything that we're going to learn about, that you're all going to learn about here today sort of takes off from there, and I think that's maybe 5 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, she nailed it. Thank you. I think that's really helpful grounding and helps us to see what comes next out of these stories. All of our towns in Vermont have these really dynamic histories. People, place, change over time. And what we have the opportunity to do today at this moment, 2024, is build on that past and see what we can make for the next 100, 200, 300 years in Vermont. I like to think about history as this, I think it's really important when we learn history to realize that the people who were living in the past, they didn't realize that they were making history. They were just going about their day. They were making choices. They were making decisions. And that's what all of us are doing every single day when we do our work. We're making decisions. We're making changes. And those are the things that are going to build the future history of Vermont that we're all part of right now. So thank you, Gail, for that grounding. Now, all of you are on stage because you are the doers. You are, you're the people who get things done. And you make it happen. So can each of you share a story, and we'll share the microphone, I think, we just pass it down, maybe Elizabeth, you can start. Can you share a story of something you've worked on here where you thought, this can only happen in Bellows Falls. And what was it about that experience that made it feel special and uniquely here?
That wasn't the question that you gave me. What, my notes say something.
All right.
I love that question though.
Okay. We're going to be, thank you for rolling with it. Bellows Falls spirit of creativity.
I think, so what made, so I'm with the Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust, and we've got a long history in the village and own quite a lot of properties right in the village, the Howard Block, that way, the Exner Block down on Canal that you can see from the Waypoint Center as you're coming across the bridge, and also the newly redeveloped Bellows Falls Garage, which you can see coming in from the north entrance to the village and across the bridge from New Hampshire. And when we were trying to decide where to place our resources for the next 3 years, we were in the middle of a strategic planning process in 2018. We hired a data analyst to kind of look at the region, because we serve both Wyndham and Windsor counties. We had to make some decisions, like where are we going to put our resources over the next 3 years. We had kind of two things in mind. One was a broader strategic vision of increasing our presence and impact in Upper Wyndham County and in Windsor County. And then we also put a pin on the map to Bellows Falls. So when Ben opened up by saying, we manifest our intentions by our presence, that really resonated with me, because the actual goal in our strategic plan was to increase our presence and our impact in Upper Wyndham and Windsor counties. And we decided to focus on Bellows Falls as a really key place that we wanted to put our resources. So we assigned one of our homeownership specialists to work out of Parks Place and do her homeownership counseling there. Bruce Whitney started working with the town on a project with private property owners to see if we could help rehab properties. Marion Major started joining the patch team and showing up monthly, and so we started to, like, it was like all hands on deck. We're going to really focus on Bellows Falls. One of the things that I did was just start to meet with people and say, what do you think is important? Here, we have a strategic intention for this town. What's important to you? And everybody pointed to the garage building. And for those of you who hadn't seen it, it was, you know, a very looming presence in the north entrance of the village, dilapidated concrete structure, and so that's really how we chose that particular project to get started. I think what made it really joyful is just how many people got involved. You know, Bellows Falls did have a reputation that was preceded this level of work, and it was not positive. And a lot of people said, oh my God, you're going to work in Bellows Falls. And I personally didn't have that experience, because I fell in love with this town much like Robert did. I showed up one day and bought property the next, and so I just had like this really positive feeling about it. And you know what? That was what our experience was. It was incredibly positive. So many people showed up to support the project. Jeff Dunbar came to all of our design meetings and gave specific feedback on the building. You know, lots of other people showed up to really make sure we had a fantastic project that we could all feel proud of, and that folks that live here can feel very proud of. So I think that was the thing that was joyful, sort of marrying our strategic intentions with community spirit, and feeling like at the end of the day, the village has new homes for 27 new residents. That's beautiful, overlooking the Connecticut River. There's a new business that into the village, and a lot of people were engaged in the process. So I think that would be my answer to why it was such a joyful experience.
I love that, and I particularly love that. I've never used the word joyful, but that's what was in for my question, and I think that's even better, right? That's something I've noticed in Bellows Falls, and I think one of the secrets to success here, right? The thing is this incredible generosity of spirit, this feeling like we're in it together. And maybe we'll just move to Robert next and say, there clearly were a lot of decisions made along the way to make these intentional changes. Can you talk a little bit about what were some moments along the way where Bellows Falls had to make those decisions about what would change, what would stay the same, and how was that handled?
Repeat the question.
Oh, sure.
That's the question you asked me. But yeah, you're going off there. I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize. We're doing a lot. What were the moments along the way where Bellows Falls had to make decisions about what would change and what would stay the same? And how was that handled?
Well, I don't think you can really point a finger at moments in time. I think, I think so much happens in our lives at serendipity that we don't want to come to terms with. But how many people have really planned out their lives in any way? And things that happen in their life, like, why did they happen? Was it because they talked to someone in the line of the post office or something that totally changed my course of action? I think the exciting thing for me when I came to Bellows Falls for the first time for a community dinner party here in 1981 was meeting a lot of people, staying overnight, seeing a town that all the storefronts were open, working class, the trains were here, and it was the specialty of the location of it. Not unlike when you go down to the petroglyphs, you still feel a special place there on the Connecticut River. Even though there's a bridge there now that's decaying and stuff, there's something you just geographically feel about the place. And I think that sense of place, we have it in all of our communities. It's just sort of trying to find that. And look at what your resources are. Look internally, the people resources, not just the financial resources, but what are your resources? And what resources do you want to share keep with the residents? What resources are you willing to share with visitors? Yeah, I think that was some of the things. Bellows Falls had fallen on very hard times when I moved here like full time in the mid-1990s. 70% of the downtown was vacant at that point, 14 years later. There was no particular game plan of what are we going to do here. I had a background in the arts, and I just said, I'm living here now. How can I roll up my sleeves and participate around the table with other people? And that's really the key. When you go to the table to do something, what can you share, not what can you take on the table, but what can you bring to the table to share with everybody else there. And I think starting that thing and then being able to go to state meetings and just sort of talk about how great Bellows Falls was, with people looking like, who's this crazy guy? It's great. And the other thing, by starting an arts organization and events, since nothing was happening here, anything I did was a success. I mean, falls, we were coming off a plateau, it's like everything was up, so it's like a total win-win situation. And now, that started in 1995 now, 30 years later, whatever, a long time later, I've gone from my middle age to sort of being actually able to become an elder in the community, a role that I want to help support. I want to share institutional knowledge of things that I know. So with that, and I'm sort of a combination between an elder and a mensch. And I basically go around and I describe myself sort of as an invasive weed. Something that really doesn't go away. And, and I really believe it. You just keep at it. The word no doesn't exist. I sort of say, two things for community development: go where the love is, and don't go against the naysayers, invite the naysayers, but go where there's some support and build the support with that. I'm going to go how many people time?
Oh, you're great.
So I'm a little off track. I was very fortunate to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award from Preservation Trust of Vermont. Thank you, but you all deserve it. You all deserve the award. But it was interesting. It wasn't by mistake that of the 4 testimonies that were given, people that talked about my past and stuff, 3 of them were from women that I worked with. And you guys out there, number one, women are complicated. Women are nuanced. Women are often really fun to work with, and women get things done.
Yes, they do.
stand back, swallow your pride, quit hitting people over the head with the whatever, sludge like men, get it done. You're missing a lot of fun, and you're going to get your project done. You really respect other people to do it. So that's my answer to this one.
I love that. I also want to point out that 2 of our 5 panelists moved here, and the next day bought a house. So I just want to see if is it the first day for anyone in Bellows Falls? It doesn't matter if you're okay. Are there houses available? We'd like to replicate this percentage rate of our new Bellows Falls boosters. So Jeff, I think Robert got to a little bit of thinking about leadership and leadership positions and what's changing around that. So in your experience working at the municipal level, how has the response been to this change in the community and this growth and development? Was there a moment where you really felt a shift? And what do you think caused that?
Well,
Was it more women involved in charge?
First off, I just want to say this is incredible for me. I grew up here. My parents moved to town when I was a year old. My twin brother and I, older brother, grew up coming in here for the movies before we could, when my parents had to drop us off. I can distinctly remember leaving for college and not thinking I would come back to Bellows Falls. I can also recall coming back in the 90s that Robert has referenced and attending a town meeting with my father. I can remember where I was sitting, and I can remember how negative it was, and that was my memory. And as Robert said, serendipity plays a big role in our life, and after 16 years I moved back here, and it was the best thing I had done. And I think that today I was getting emotional watching the films in the different communities, and the one thing that we all have in common, we have a history, but we have people as our resource, and it's our most incredible resource, and I've really embraced that here in Bellows Falls. And your first question was about sort of along the theme, what the magic is. And there really is no magic, I don't think. And all of our communities can do what we have. We've done some of the things that your communities have. We're all inspired in what we do. This morning I was thinking, what are the themes that I want to talk about? And I think celebration. Number one, celebrate what we have, and we have so much. And I think that was the attitudinal shift for Bellows Falls, is that we chose not to go where the negativity was happening, and enough people joined together in a positive way to celebrate what we have and where we can go. So collaboration, I think, celebrating brings collaboration, and collaboration brings about celebration. And we're all here to celebrate, and I commend everybody in your communities for doing what you're doing. Keep going. What I had realized when I joined the board, I guess I campaigned 5 years ago, and I was asked to run. I was like, no way. The dynamic was not attractive, and I just thought, why would I do that? I have enough other stress in my life. But what I found was you have to do the uncomfortable things, and you have to be the positive voice and listen and slowly pull people in. And my stepping off the board recently was a difficult decision, because right now we're in a really strong point. It's really fun to serve. But there was a young fellow and his family who moved here in 2021 who I see leadership ability in, and I think it's incumbent upon us to bring people in when you see that someone is capable, and help them move into those positions and support the community. And I wanted to bring in at a good time, and also direct my attention elsewhere. So I can ramble on, but welcome everybody, all of you homeowners to be, welcome to and renters, and buy your mugs.
And I love that so many of you, we haven't talked specifically about creative businesses and using the arts and culture, but everyone who's spoken so far has really spoken about creativity and the tools and skills of creativity. Even everything you just said, Jeff, those are all things you learn through theater and performance, right? About being a little uncomfortable or being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, sticking with it, saying yes to things, and just making it work, receiving the gift to like go into the next stage.
And on a municipal level, I really do have to, hats off to our staff, who, again, collaboration, when we start working together and listening and seeing what people, directions, there's so much that needs to be done, we can't do it all. So choose the things that make a difference, and we have a great community, great staff, wonderful volunteers, and so town hall, all the people here doing work, it's in large part to them that it's inspirational and it's a pleasure to serve. And for those of you that don't get engaged, the rewards are just, I can't say enough about how happy I am that I do that.
I love that, thank you. So, Michael, you are kind of wearing the hat of local business owner. And what made you want to start a business here? Can you talk about what attracted you to Bellows Falls and make you want to put in the works? Running a small business is no joke, and you're doing the work out there.
Yeah, so I don't have a good answer for that. It's kind of involved. And I didn't realize, kind of similar to Robert and Elizabeth, I just stopped here for gas one day in the early 2000s. And fell in love with the downtown. There were a lot of empty storefronts at the time, but the architecture was fantastic. It was so immersive when you were walking around the village that you were really in something special, and it piqued my interest. I was working at a jewelry company, Tiffany & Company at the time as a gemologist, and I decided to come up and look at real estate here. So at the time, of course, the safe way to travel for a gay person, there was a book before iPhones of like places you can stay, and one of them was the River Mist Bed and Breakfast here in town. And then they really sold me on this community too, showing me the historic properties and introducing me to people. And
We can't hear back here.
oh, I'm sorry. Is this better? So it kind of evolved. It wasn't a straight line. I started a business working with antique jewelry and decided to give it a try up here. And from that, just getting involved in the community, meeting amazing people. There was just such great community. People were so helpful. Like, I decided to open up an office downtown, which evolved into a jewelry store for antique jewelry, and just the level of help, people coming in. I mean, at the time, the development director came over with a shovel because I was ripping up the floors in the storefront, and people were lending tools, and those little things really made you feel like you were part of something. So at that point, Sam's Army Navy's went out of business here. And the building, which always walked by and imagined it could be a great retail space, being the largest retail space downtown, I talked to him for about a year, and we came up with an agreement and purchased that building, which is right next to Town Hall here. So I opened up a Wyndham Antique Center there, an antique co-op that been 12 years now. Next to it, we went to a 24-hour gym, and then a few years after opening that and renovating that building, which actually I should say, the whole process, although it was very stressful, getting everything up to code, there's so many great people to help. Caitlin Corkins, I'm just crying on the phone to her plenty of times. But we have a great revolving loan fund here in the downtown, and there's so many things that the town does to really help people get started. So the combination of that, tax credits, loans, was able to get the building up to code. So then walking to work every day, I kept walking by the Edward Arms block, which was the first brick block when you come into town here. And just imagined how that rusty facade and broken windows could be really a stately building if it was redone. So sure enough, my eyes were bigger than my stomach, and I reached out to the owner, and a year later we were in contract, and that started another renovation, but which has been really successful. It now has apartments, 3 storefronts. There's a level of offices, kind of like a shared co-op setup with office spaces, shared lobby, and resources. And it's really come online and become something. And yeah, and I've just felt like building community helps build your business, and that's kind of philosophy that we've taken. Instead of as much PR, I'd rather put money into the downtowns that helps, the quality of life for people who live here, or makes it inviting for people who come into the town. So the business is kind of grown with the community, and I always encourage, we have a lot of downtime, sometimes we're open 7 days a week now for 12 years, so if there is time, and there's a project downtown, I would encourage people to help out and get involved in the community. So it's kind of an infinite give and take with the community to business, so it wasn't like a straight line, but business is doing great. Still plenty of projects to do, but yeah, I don't know how I'm doing now. Thank you.
No, I know that. The sense that all of this success is contagious, and historic preservation is contagious, right? You see one building that is preserved and looks amazing and dynamic, and then it kind of inspires you to do the next project, and the next project, and the next project. So Gail, I'll just pass the microphone back to you, and can you share a little bit about, sorry everyone. Oh, you know what, Sarah, can you grab the other microphone, and maybe the folks on the far side can use their microphone, and the folks on my side can use this microphone. I just don't think we should try to avoid the process. Yeah, exactly. Something else. So can you give a few examples of how Bellows Falls has highlighted this history? You talked about the whole history, but what are some examples of how you have highlighted history in a way that's led to the current vitality we're experiencing?
Well, I was trying to think about one project specifically that would encapsulate everything, and I found it very difficult to find just one, and I think that's something that everybody's going to experience that today, because you're all going to learn about the multitude of projects, historic preservation projects, that have been really successful here in town through this very conference. So you can learn about go see the riverfront park and the Adams Grist Mill, and going up to the cemetery and the meeting house, and see the Painted Ladies tour and the Kitsy Ponderosa project, and going over to Saxon's River and churches over there. So I think probably your experience today will inform that much better than I could hold as one example to explain that. But I think what got us to this point is the fact that why we have such a deep catalog of successful historic preservation is that we've made a lot of mistakes along the way over the past 40, 50, 60 years, and we recognize that. We know that there are some things that we let go that maybe we shouldn't have let go, and regret it. And not all of that was the community's fault necessarily. These old industrial places have things like fires and prohibitive expenses to renovate certain things, or there's contamination in a lot of these locations. Or, for instance, the bridge, the Bellows Bridge that you may or may not see, depending on if you go down that way. The town does nothing to, the town doesn't own it. The state of Vermont doesn't own that bridge. The state of New Hampshire does. So we were limited to a certain extent by just distance as to certain things that the community can do. And just because of the history of the town and the loss of revenue over years, and the loss of properties, that I think that stretch of losses over the mid-century up into the 1990s really got people thinking, because you can see it when you're in the downtown. If you go walking around and there, any of these parking spots that you might see, these wide open parking areas, a building used to be there, and it was either torn down or burned at some point. So there are physical reminders that we see every day. There are physical absences in our landscape that you always think about it, like, oh yeah, that used to be, and me being a local kid, I know the story behind that. It used to be the such and so used to work there. So there's this whole thing, always hearing my mom, my dad, my grandma telling me about this, that, and the other thing. And so that, not that that's, I think what Jeff was alluding to, I think that used to really be much more present and prevalent as the narrative of all the loss in the town. And I'm not sure when it changed or how it changed or why it changed, but similarly, we started, maybe because of those losses, we just collectively understand that a little bit better. You know, maybe we hit rock bottom, we've got nowhere else to go, but the things that we do preserve and we do love, we love a lot, and we love them very hard, and we love them very vociferously. And maybe that more than anything informs all of this as to how we go forward. And we've learned a lot how to do things along the way, partnerships and who you connect with. And it's the community building that how we brought ourselves back together maybe a little bit, is to reconnect as a community, save the things. It's like, yeah, this is important, this is special, this is our place, and let that direct you.
Yeah, I think, Perfect, I was gonna ask if anyone wants to respond to that, so do.
Yeah, I'm going to add to it, actually. I mean, having, sort of little like institutional knowledge here, having bought the house in 1981 when the town, all the stores were open, everything was happening to 95 when I moved here full town, it was 70% vacancy rate as we went around the square, Exeter Block empty, where Michael's store is empty. Well, that was still Sam's, next to it empty, boarded up. I really sort of pinpoint the development shift to, Housing Vermont and the Rocking Area Community Land Trust identifying a building, the Exeter Block, purchasing it, working with the town, and investing money to restore that building. And that's really, I view as the kickoff investment point. And that was back in 1997, they purchased the building, opened in 2000. Yes, we had a vacant hotel, and people said, let's open a hotel. You're not going to open a hotel with another building across the street boarded up from a fire. That is not how it happens. And Housing, that partnership again, united and took the Howard Block across the street and invented that. So within about a 6-year period, we had some major investment of buildings were brought up to code with affordable housing that had 13 retail spaces in them, that the affordable housing people figured out how to keep those as retail spaces, and they had to figure different funding streams. So, I feel that we're very fortunate as the community evolves and as prices go up on things and rents, then we have 13 retail spaces in our downtown that have to make money, but they're on a slightly different model. And I think that's really important, because in America, the only kind of success I see is money gets invested, prices go up, rents go up, everything costs more, and people get driven out of being able to live in their homes. The school teachers, the fire people, I don't want that to happen. I think we have to protect against that happening in the future. I think the other great advantage we have living in Vermont is the scale of Vermont. The scale of Vermont gives us access to people, gives us access to each other. 640,000 people in the whole state. Yes, we are a rural state, but you can talk to people, you can talk to the division. One department, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, talks to the housing people.
Cover it.
So you went past the other one and looked for,
Come back.
That's the spirit of Bellows
Keep
Falls.
telling me what to say. It was great. It's such a unique experience having worked in different things like, housing agencies don't talk to preservationists, because the departments are big, but in this state, you have a lot of access to people, and take advantage of that. And basically, I always respect everybody until there's some reason to disrespect. But, you know, be civil, talk, and listen to what people are saying. But I really can't say enough about what affordable housing did to set a groundwork that then 15, 20 years later, people can start to come in and look at this community and see possibilities in private development.
Yeah,
So,
Elizabeth,
really advanced process.
do you want to respond to that, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm gonna build on it, thank you, Robert, for, you started something that I was gonna talk about, and that is the power of long-term affordability. And we have a lot of presence in the village, both with rental property, with the properties that Robert just described, but also shared equity homes, so single-family homes, and they're scattered throughout town. You probably drive by them all the time and not realize that that's affordable housing. But VHCD, who provides a lot of the funding for our projects, early on saw the wisdom of permanent affordability. And I think we're going to see the power of that as this town continues to grow and evolve, because when we started the last project we did with the garage, we saw that there were over 50% of the renters here were paying more than they could afford in rent. And that was one of the big drivers of us wanting to do a project here. What we saw during the pandemic, and Mike Pichek has great numbers describing this, lots and lots of people started flooding into Vermont and bringing their jobs with them. And I think he was talking last night about the average income, median income in Bellows Falls pre-pandemic was $45,000, and now it's like $74,000. And so you're seeing incomes rising, and that's actually really good. Right? We're going to see more money available for to support businesses, and we want that economic diversity, and that's a healthy community. So as that continues to happen, as real estate prices rise, having community assets held in perpetuity with affordability in perpetuity ensures that that economic diversity continues, and that's people who grew up here and people who are working in retail shops and different jobs that pay modest wages will have a place to live long term. So it's part of the mix of revitalization is to hold some of those housing assets in community trust, and that's what the housing trust does. We hold that and stewards those. So we're excited to be part of that mix and part of maintaining that healthy economic diversity as the town continues to grow.
Yeah, Elizabeth, that's such an important point and a great transition to what will have to be our last question. And I encourage you all to find these panelists over the course of the day and tap into their incredible wisdom and experiences, because they have a lot more to say for 45 minutes on stage in lots of good ways. So Elizabeth, you mentioned permanently affordable housing, what that's going to do in the future. So I just want everyone to think about, or maybe share what comes up for you about what's next for Bellows Falls. We're at a moment of success, celebrating what's happened over 20, 30 years. What do you see, put on a future forecasting hat, what do you see coming next? You know, 20 years ago, there was a similar conference here, so it's 20 years later. If the historic preservation downtown conference comes back in 20 more years, what are y'all going to be talking about on stage? Yeah, go ahead, Robert. Do you want to pass Robert one of the microphones? Just keep them apart. Yeah.
I think what we all want to keep our eye on is the changing demographic. And I think what sort of started to kick that off was probably COVID. And how many of us noticed either second homeowners moving to their second homes full time, or people drifting into Vermont because they were ready to move from the cities or something. So I think it's the combination of what COVID kind of initiated, the huge thing about people working online now, so you could be in Bellows Falls, Vermont, and your main company could be in Barcelona, Spain. I mean, that whole shift, 15 years ago, we would have been at a meeting saying, who moved to town? Well, they probably got a job at the industrial park or maybe at the school, and that still happens. But our new migration is such a whole different thing, and together with Jeff and some other people, we had this little group called Midway, and I was, what does it stand for?
Rockingham Incremental Development Working Group.
Got it. But we started to meet degrees to go back and find out who's moved to our community or bought houses, was like the easiest way to do it. Working through our lister's office. And we started having regular meetings with people that 35 people would show up that said they moved here. And I said, well, are you being welcomed to the community? Are you connecting with our community? And, you know, they're an incredible resource. I mean, people, in fact, one of the people Jeff referenced that ran for trustee was one of those people that had recently moved to the community. So it's very easy for you to go back to your communities and keep an eye on who's moving there. Are they being welcomed? Are they being integrated with your ideas? It doesn't cost much money to do. It's just having an effective meeting, sit around. We don't have any agendas at those meetings except to sit around and socialize. And then we can direct them to plenty of committees or agencies that exist if they want to get involved in a different way. But I think it's all keeping our eye on the demographic shift and integrating them into the community is really, really smart to do.
Thanks, Robert. I think that's a really great open house. Well, I don't know, like that with Gary.
Oh, I know it's gonna say.
All right, so sure, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just gonna echo, I'm a housing provider as well, the shift in demographics is far more, people looking for single, one-bedroom apartments. That is a change that, the community, is gonna have to embrace. We have these huge homes. I looked at a property that I was looking at, it, like, how do you make this be condos or something that could be, it's a property that is, would take probably $1 million income to maintain. It used to be a doctor's office where he had his stable hand had an apartment up above. There were 2 apartments on the top floor. He had his medical practice on the first floor. It's one of these gorgeous Victorian homes in town, and it's 2 teachers who live there. How does a property like that be preserved in a community like ours? It's either going to be someone moving in who has the means and loves the architecture. So I think that we need to look at creative ways to protect what we have, be willing to change and change the formula to do those things and work with housing agencies, be willing to accept a different model to have either for a community like Bellows Falls to support itself, we need more tax revenue. It's going to take more people. So there's more people bringing their jobs. Industry will not follow. We need to make ourselves attractive to those things coming in. So.
Yeah.
I just want to build on that and give a shout out to Scott Pickup and Gary Fox, because if you talk to Scott about and ask him this question, he's got a list of things in his, Scott Pickup is the town manager. He's got a list of things in his sites that he knows he wants to get done, and when we finished the garage, he said, check. You know, and then it went on to, you know, to share his vision for the island, for the Bellows Bridge. You know, Gary's working on the train station, and there's just a lot going on, I think, that will drive a lot of activity in town. And it's really exciting. There's a lot of people with a very clear vision in this town. And, you know, Robert describing how I didn't know that you were literally welcoming newcomers proactively. Like, that's just brilliant. A way to get people involved right away and build community and integrate new people and not be afraid of new people. I mean, I think that's really quite brilliant, because a lot of towns are afraid of that change. And you're embracing that and then utilizing the new talent that's coming. So I think that's part of why the future is so bright for Bellows Falls.
Yeah, I think that idea of embracing change, of being intentionally welcoming, none of these things have happened, well, they maybe weren't exactly planned. They didn't happen by accident. So I think one of the things about historic preservation that is really important is historic preservation is not about things staying the same. Historic preservation is actually about change and embracing change. And that is something that all of our communities across the state can learn from. The future of Vermont is gonna look different than it did 75 years ago, and that's great. We want that to happen. And I think nowhere is doing that better right now than Bellows Falls. And embracing that change, being intentionally welcoming, really honoring its history in a way that's helping it look to the future of what it can be. So I want to thank our panel so much for sharing their expertise. Today, ask them questions, pick their brain, help them come visit your communities. They're incredible resources and donors. And a huge thank you to the team for organizing this great event. It's done.
panelists, and thank you, Susan, for moderating that great discussion. Just gonna do some housekeeping things, believe it or not, we're right on time. So here's just a list of random housekeeping items. Lunch will be served, box lunch style.